I'm getting back into the habit of recording some short audio clips more often. After all that hassle of having to keep doing it, batch uploading videos to YouTube because of YouTube strikes. But something I've noticed lately, and I thought it was worth making a video about it. Here's the thing. It's something I want to call the virtuous girl hunters. I think I've mentioned this before, maybe not in videos, but I believe I have during live streams and conversations with other content creators, that it's really easy for it to happen. Some younger guys start bad-mouthing MGTOW, etc. And what's worse is that even when the guy says he's conservative or right-wing, he still starts using feminist rhetoric, you know? He starts saying, oh, but you guys are misogynists, and so on. I mean, the guy ends up defending feminism and egalitarianism. And he doesn't even realize it, right? That's the worst kind of feminist, the worst kind of egalitarian. It's the one who's a feminist and egalitarian but doesn't even realize it, you know? But anyway, there were some of these guys who made a lot of criticisms back in 2018, and they ended up changing part of their rhetoric. For example, some of them started to criticize the modern girls part, not just the neutral ones, the left-wing ones, but also some of those who claim to be right-wing. We all know the type, puts on a Bolsonaro t-shirt, a Brazilian flag in their profile, and that's it. Just like that, a Conservadia is born. Or they also started criticizing some who were kind of in the middle. ANTAP, the libertarian crowd. But it's totally normal for these guys to criticize, because honestly, if they're under 25, they're not looking for anything serious. At most, maybe a relationship, because they don't have the status or resources to have anything more. Besides that. And anyway, in the dating market, it's women who are calling the shots when it comes to interactions. It's women who are deciding when it's time for casual relationships, when it's time to date, and when it's time to get serious. They're the ones setting everything, they're the ones in control, and men are just going along with it. So for these guys, they've never even gotten to the point of having enough resources and status to even think about moving in with someone, to think about getting married, to think about having kids. They've never stopped to study the laws, right? So it's really easy. It's like that ignorant person who doesn't know a damn thing but still opens their mouth to talk nonsense. Basically young, you know? But once a guy gets past 25, past 30, he starts to see the whole picture, both the dating scene and the legal landscape, in a different way. And that would be the focus of this short video, which is this. If you look at it, regardless of whether guys are conservative or not, there are a lot of guys who are just centrists or neutral. I've seen in the last year or two a bunch of posts popping up, for example on 4chan or Reddit, on those pages that are more about discussing ideology and also relationships with cases like this. These are men who have reached their 30s, between 25 and 30, who are looking for something serious, looking for a woman to marry and have kids with. And what inevitably ends up happening is the guy's there dating her. He's been with her for a long time, thinking about moving in together, maybe thinking about getting engaged, married, and having kids. And then he finds out something about her past. Let's go. The guy spent years of his life studying, working, building up what you could call the requirements. To be a good husband, to be a good father. And while he was doing that, who knows how many other guys the women were with, right? They were living that casual sex life, the Tinder life, Instagram, and so on. In short, we all know the story well. Being supported by daddy, going to college just to hook up with a bunch of different guys at the same time. So what we're seeing is these stories repeating more and more, which is this. The guy finds out that his girlfriend, or his future wife, his fiancée, was the lunchbox of the university. Or he finds out what she did. Who knows how many orgies. Back when she was younger, you know? And then the guy can't accept it, and there was this one comment that really caught my attention. It was one I saw in a 4chan post where the guy was asking himself, how am I supposed to build a family with a slut? With a slut, with a prostitute, with a whore, something like that. He used the term whore. It can be translated in several ways. But basically, this is the future scenario that These guys, the fence sitters, but especially the conservatives, the tradcons, are going to face down the line. Because this is something we've talked about many times, that they're always willing to police and limit men. I mean, men have to be virtuous, men have to be religious, men have to behave properly and all that. But when we suggest that there should be some kind of evaluation criteria, some filtering, that there should be some requirements, some control on the female side, no, because it's pure Marianism, you know? These guys really buy into that idea that no, women are, what's the mean now? Women are naturally good, you know? So it's the man who has original sin. The man is the one who's a wretch. He has to be controlled. He has to be controlled, supervised, and regulated, not the woman. It's like something I said recently. Actually, only women have sexual freedom. Men have sexual responsibility. Because women can have sexual freedom and they're not held responsible for anything. If she sleeps with a guy and regrets it, she can accuse the guy of rape, right? If she catches an STD, she'll blame God and everyone else, but she won't blame herself. If she has an unwanted pregnancy, she'll want to put the blame on the guy. And if she can't blame the guy, she'll blame all of society. And that goes for both the public and private sectors. That's where those feminist laws in the private sector come in. So, in the same way, what we've seen happen, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, is a transition from Generation Y women to Generation Z women. Which was this: Generation Y women also started their sex lives before men did. They had more sexual partners than men. But at least Generation Y women had several relationships in a row, several monogamous relationships, one after another. I mean, they had several boyfriends, one after the other, right? The difference with Generation Z women is that Generation Z women are totally marmitinia, totally on the carousel. They're the ones we've already seen some stories about online. They're the women who say there were times in their lives when, from Monday to Friday, every day they were sleeping with a different guy. That's the change. We can see that things have gotten exponentially worse. And these younger guys in those posts, they're right on that edge. Some are the youngest to Generation Y, and some are already Generation Z. And that's where the question comes in. How's a guy supposed to deal with that? I mean, he played the beta game, he did what society expected him to do. He studies, he works, you know? He shows he's an honest guy, that he's a capable guy, only to get cheated on. A partner there to get married and have kids with, but meanwhile, women are left free and unrestrained to do whatever they want, without any kind of demands or expectations. And on top of that, during this time, a bunch of feminist laws are being passed. But we know that these more neutral guys, more conservative, these idealizers of women, they don't care about the laws. They come with that speech like, no, you just have to choose the right woman, right? You just have to choose the right woman, then you're safe. It's the same thing as, for example, those guys who say you just have to be alpha. The guy says that if you're truly alpha, you'll never get divorced, you'll never face a false accusation. The conservatives say the same thing. If you choose the right woman, live a virtuous life, you'll never face a false accusation, you'll never get divorced. But the funny thing is this, because in this case, for example, these are stories about guys who haven't even gotten married yet, haven't had kids, and even at this stage, the women have already failed. They weren't able to meet their expectations, not even their minimum demands. Remembering the phrase the guy used in the post in question, he said, "How am I supposed to build a family with a slud?" That's basically it. That's the track record, let's put it that way, especially over the last 10 years. That's when things like Tinder and Happen started popping up and all that. This is gonna blow up even more now, in this decade of the 2020s, for the following reason. Up until then, these women still had a certain look, fertility, right? So they were still attractive. What they needed to do to, let's say, fool these men was to hide their past. Really hide their past, you know? Act. And hope the guy never finds out about her past, because otherwise he might call off the wedding, he might dump her. And we know that nowadays, if the guy does that, he could end up getting accused of something too. Sometimes the family court is all over dating relationships. You don't even have to be living with the woman. But anyway, In this next decade, there's going to be another aggravating factor. Women are going to have to hide their past, something they don't do. We can already see that with a bunch of screenshots, a ton of posts all over the internet. They're going to have to put on an act, but then there's going to be that emergency situation when they start hitting their 30s, right? And then that's going to be the fate of the guys hunting for good girls because but it's going to get harder and harder to find a woman who's even remotely suitable to become a wife, to become a mother. The guy will either have to fool himself or there's just no way around it. He's going to start getting burned, and there's not much he can do about it. Because we've already tried to get these guys' attention several times, saying, man, you have to start holding women accountable. You can't just hold men accountable. But it's a bunch of guys with a Mary complex who think all women are saints, and then on the other hand, you have the guys who aren't so conservative, who don't expect to get married and have kids. Even those guys are kind of going to have to change their plans because, for example, even in my case, I only expected to find a girl who would at least be a good companion. Each living in their own place, having a relationship, and maybe when we're older, moving in together or something like that. Women as a whole have failed. In this expectation of mine, which was already a low expectation, a really low expectation. And then the laws come into play. And there are countless men who don't have such a strong reproductive instinct who are in the same situation as me, who will probably end up becoming celibate or will end up buying a doll, doing something different, right? So the number of women left over is just going to keep increasing. The difference is that the men who still have some hope of getting married and having kids, they're going to suffer, you know? They're going to suffer. They're going to be pissed off because it's like it was a promise. Since they were young, they were told that their destiny is to become a husband, to become a father, and that if you do that, you'll be more valued. Your life will be better. That's something they won't be able to achieve, and that's why they're going to be pissed. Now, the men who didn't have that expectation, who didn't have that goal, it's a little easier for them. It's easier to adapt and it's easier to develop, to individually find another path, something else to do with your life. But in the end, that's all this video was about. It's just something I saw happening in the United States, and it'll probably start happening here in Brazil too. Because at the end of the day, the hardware, the software, it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. We're just at different stages of degeneration. So, just like conservatives, tradcons, and the guys chasing after virtuous girls abroad have already been running into trouble for a few years now, inevitably, here in Brazil, pretty soon they're going to start running into trouble too. Because both humans operate the same way, and the plans, the laws, the cultural changes that happened over there are happening here too. In some cases, it's even happening faster here. Here, but now all that's left is to keep watching to see how this whole story unfolds.